Big Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Big Apple Blitz. What is going on? Matt O'Leary alongside Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, happy Victory Monday, my friend.
Happy Victory Monday. Our first double Victory Monday of the season. Both the Jets and the Giants picking up wins this week. Pretty exciting stuff, man. I thought it was going to be a doom and gloom year for my G-men, but they had a very solid day yesterday and picked up their first win of the season.
Absolutely. We'll get to that in the second half. Figure we go chronological here. Jets play Thursday night. So, we have a few days to sit on this one, but Jets beat up on the New England Patriots 24-3. I don't even know if that score really does justice how much the Jets dominated this game. When looking at some of the numbers, the Jets had 400 yards of offense to the New England Patriots 139 yards. They kept New England out of the end zone. They would have kept them off the score sheet if not for a questionable personal foul call on the Jets defense. So all in all, look, I thought this game would be a lot closer than what it ended up being, but how can we not be excited about that New York Jets win over New England? What were some of your biggest takeaways from this one?
I mean, my number one biggest takeaway is going to be the fact that Aaron Rodgers was Aaron Rodgers. Like, he was sick. He was standing in the pocket. He was throwing that ball with so much velocity. I mean, it was flying out of his hand, and it looked like a bullet just reaching his intended target every single time. I loved watching him play. It was literally giving me flashbacks and chills to like 3 years ago when we were watching Aaron Rodgers at his peak with the Green Bay Packers. So that was a lot of fun for me. I thought that was excellent. Just seeing Rodgers back in full force, 27 of 35 passing, 281 yards and 2 touchdowns. His first full performance in MetLife, and man, it was a good one.
It absolutely was. Pull up the box score numbers for this game, as you pointed out. Aaron Rodgers, 281 yards. I wanted him, selfishly, I wanted him to get up over 300 because there's been like a social media narrative that he hasn't hit it in X amount of games. I believe it's back to 2021. So it's like a tracker of how many days it's been. But I thought he played absolutely spectacular in this game. Looked like the Aaron Rodgers of old. And I loved the aggressiveness that the Jets came out in this game. They came out throwing the ball, and then that ended up setting up the run. Braylon Allen was really good. Breece Hall, not flashy numbers on the ground, but did get in the end zone. And all in all, like, the Jets moved the ball at will offensively, and for the third week in a row scored 3 touchdowns in a game. I didn't know this was possible, Anthony. They have 9 touchdowns on the season. They didn't get 9 offensive touchdowns until week 11 last year. This is uncharted territory for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's a really fun statistic to throw out there. I mean, night and day difference between this Jets team and last year's Jets team. I feel like everything's clicking for this offense. And the greatest part about that is I think it's clicking. Rodgers is throwing the ball well. We're getting a nice ground and pound attack from Braylon Allen and Breece Hall. And I feel like this offense has not hit its stride just yet. So you're talking more touchdowns this year than last year. Like, excellent stuff. They're making so much progress. And I don't even think they've come close to reaching their ceiling.
No, I don't think so either. And it felt like there was still some, meat on the bone here with this Jets win. And again, like, not complaining at all. They won by 3 touchdowns against the Patriots in a primetime game. Like, I've been on the wrong end of those kind of primetime blowouts so often in my life, and very often against those New England Patriots. The Sam Darnold seeing ghost game sticks out. Even in 2010, the year the Jets were awesome, they lost 45-3 on the road in New England on like a Monday night game. So we've seen the Jets, even when they're a good team, get blown out by New England. And clearly the tide is turning here. The Patriots, I thought, were very scrappy through the first 2 weeks of the year. But in this game, they couldn't get anything going whatsoever against the Jets defense. And that is almost just as impressive to me as the Jets offense. Defense stepped up in a huge way. 7 sacks. Will McDonald was awesome again for the second week in a row. So now it feels like it's going both offensively and defensively after we've been kind of waiting for this defense to look like its old self. And I thought we got that on Thursday night.
I thought so too. Will McDonald, man, I'm very happy that I picked him up in that dynasty league that I mentioned in every episode after letting Jermaine Johnson go to IR. So Will McDonald's just been so awesome, and that's been probably one of the most exciting emergent points for the Jets this season because there was so much controversy, obviously, and there still is surrounding Hassan Reddick and that entire situation. And the Jets needed players to step up. And when you lose Jermaine Johnson, it's almost demoralizing. But Will McDonald has played so well that you have a lot to be excited about now in the front seven, along with everybody else. Quinnen Williams also having a sack and a tackle for loss in that game. And Tack McKinley even had a half a sack. So that Jets defensive front was looking like the defensive front that we were hyping up all off season long. And if they can continue that pace, it could be an exciting year. The only thing that I question is, can they do this against some of the better teams in the league rather than just the Patriots? Because, yeah, the Patriots had a win going into this game. They were 1-1, and they had a very surprising week 1 victory. But let's be real, when we were looking at them all off season long, we were talking about how the Patriots might be one of the worst teams in football. So I think this is more of a regression to the mean for them. So I just need to see the Jets continue to play well defensively and stack those good performances and then put them together versus some of the best teams that they're going to face in their schedule.
Absolutely. And I think that's a fair way to look at it. And that's not taking away anything from their performance on Thursday night. They did their job. They beat up on a team that they were supposed to beat up on. And it's the NFL. Like, these guys aren't just going to roll over and die, but I thought it was a really good and strong performance. And you mentioned, Will McDonald, how successful he was, added another 2 sacks. You had Tack McKinley, Solomon Thomas, your guy from Florida, Leonard Taylor, in the mix too. Everyone's getting involved here on the New York Jets defensive line. Wanted to point out Ike W comments. I thought this is a good point to talk about. The difference of Rodgers moving and Cousins moving around is crazy. So wanted to discuss this point in particular. Clearly at 40 years old, it's going to be 41 in December. Aaron Rodgers doesn't look like early in his career Aaron Rodgers when he was rolling around and making a ton of plays. But I will say, I thought he looked a lot better this past week moving around and looked a lot more comfortable, even tucked it and ran a couple times, 3 carries for 18 yards. Love that. But you make the comparison to Kirk Cousins, who had the more traditional surgery versus the speed bridge that Aaron Rodgers got. And like, Kirk Cousins doesn't really look all that comfortable yet. So it's interesting looking at the comparison and how both those guys look after the different kinds of surgeries that they got.
It's been very interesting to see how the surgeries have affected both of those quarterbacks. It's very kind of intriguing that the 2 injuries happened to 2 separate players in similar age ranges, and we were able to have this season-long comparison of how the 2 of them recover. I think that's going to be very interesting to follow throughout the year, but it's true. When you're watching Kirk Cousins, he's not pushing off of his back foot. Obviously, he had the right Achilles is what he injured, and that's really important to be able to push off of your back foot and shift your body weight and drive the football forward. Now with Rodgers, he doesn't need to do that as much because we all know he can throw from his knees if he wants and probably hit a target from 75 yards out. He doesn't need to shift his body weight. He could just whip it all arm and wrist. But with Kirk Cousins being a much different style of quarterback than Rodgers is, it has been very interesting to see the way that the 2 of them have recovered. Kirk Cousins just doesn't seem like he's anywhere close to where Aaron Rodgers is. Rodgers looks like he's younger and healthier and faster, and he's not younger, but he is healthier and faster, resultingly because of his surgery that he had. And he looked very mobile, and he looked very good, and his arm has definitely not lost a touch at all. So it's been really interesting to see the comparisons of both of those 2 quarterbacks. And Rodgers, man, just looks like Aaron Rodgers, and it's been fun to watch.
I think my favorite play from him in this game was the touchdown throw that he made to Garrett Wilson on the goal line. Like, that's a very risky throw. And for probably half the league, that's getting intercepted and being run back the other way. But he put that ball in an absolutely perfect spot, and he had to throw it with, some intense velocity. To me, that looks like a guy who's up there with Allen and Mahomes as maybe the other two who can make that throw. There's not many people in the league who can do that. And again, I get it. It's only one game, and I'm not saying that Rodgers is, definitely the third best quarterback in the league, but him showing signs of still being that guy is so huge. And I thought that was the one that was really eye popping for me in this game.
No doubt. I was really, really excited to see all of that. Rodgers, man, I'll just say this last point on Rodgers. I think the chemistry is really starting to develop there with these receivers, with Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams. One of those back shoulder throws that Mike Williams hauled in was just so exciting to me, because I remember all offseason we were talking about that signing and how he is the perfect wide receiver for Aaron Rodgers. And we saw that flash tremendously versus the Patriots with one of those back shoulders. And I thought that was something that, if they can maintain that pace and keep that going throughout the year, Mike Williams could end up being a really key focal point in this Jets offense, in conjunction with all of the greatness that Garrett Wilson is providing to the team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And they spread the ball around much more in this game. Tyler Conklin ended up leading the team in receiving, 5 catches for 93 yards. Mike Williams had 3 catches in this game. Garrett Wilson, relatively quiet, just the 5 catches for 33 yards. Did get in the end zone, though. And Allen Lazard, how about that? Another week, another touchdown. He's got 3 touchdowns through 3 games this year. Looks a lot different with Rodgers throwing in the ball than Zach Wilson.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? It's been very surprising to see him kind of emerge this season and return to form, I guess. Or maybe this is even the best form of his career, I might even argue, with Allen Lazard. He's looked really, really good and has been a major surprise for the Jets, but one to definitely be excited about.
Now, the Jets can't win a game without losing someone to injury, so we have to discuss Morgan Moses gets banged up in this game. Thankfully, good news is it doesn't seem like it's as bad as it initially looked on the field. He looked like he was in a lot of pain with his knee down on the field, but it's looks like it's an MCL sprain, so that's a 2 to 4 week window. But to me, while I don't ever want to see anyone get hurt, and I want Morgan Moses to make a full recovery and be back sooner rather than later, I'm excited to see Olu Fashanu, the Jets' first round pick, step up and get some starts under his belt. He came in relief, granted a small sample, only 14 snaps in this game, but I thought it was a continuation of the preseason for him, where he just looked steady. It wasn't anything super flashy, not any like highlight reel pancakes, but just steady, solid pass protection, good in the run game, which was maybe his biggest critique coming out of school, was how he performed in the run game. But I thought he had a good training camp and preseason, and having a guy like that to come in when you lose someone like Morgan Moses for a few weeks, I think is going to be huge for this team.
Yeah, I totally agree. And looking at the PFF stats, you're right. He had a 78.1 run blocking grade, which actually far outweighed his grade in pass protection. So if you trust in PFF's eye tests and their grading system, he was really good in the run blocking. Again, like you said, a small sample size of only 13 total snaps, but I think that it's going to be interesting to see how he develops over the course of the next few weeks with Morgan Moses out of the lineup. And this is why we were advocating in the offseason for the Jets to go out and draft an offensive tackle, because, yeah, they did the patchwork of bringing in Tyron Smith and bringing in Morgan Moses. But we said when they made those signings, well, the job's not finished, because you know that at least one of those 2 guys, if not both of those 2 guys, are going to miss time due to injuries at some point during the regular season. You need someone to step in. That Jets should absolutely go ahead and make drafting an offensive lineman a priority. And they did. They drafted Olu in the first round, and now we're going to get a good glimpse of him. Whether or not he takes this starting job and runs with it for the rest of the season, who knows? Totally possible. But I think with Morgan Moses out of the lineup, now we get some developmental time for Olu at the very least, and I'm very excited to see what he's able to do on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Jets got him some work on the right side of the offensive line towards the second week of the preseason, and I guess in the second half, really, of training camp. At first, he was exclusively on the left side, which is what he played at Penn State. He was a left tackle there for a few years. But I thought getting him the work at right tackle specifically was important for a situation like this, because Morgan Moses, normally an Iron Man, plays a ton of games. Last year, missed 3 games, which, at 32, you would take that. Now 33. But we learned in the offseason he's playing through a torn pectoral, and now is hurt just a couple of games into the 2024 season. So having that guy who you could essentially have as your swing tackle, who's an 11th overall pick, is a really good luxury to have, and one again that I think I'll be keeping a close eye on, not only in this Denver game but in the few weeks to come. Wanted to ask what you or how you felt about the New England Patriots tossing Drake May into the fire on the final drive there of the game. I thought a tough spot, down 3 touchdowns, final drive of the game behind 2 backups on the left side of the offensive line. But were you for or against them tossing May in that spot?
Yeah, I'm actually so for it. I think that was good practice by the Patriots, and I think their handling of Drake May has been excellent. I think looking around the NFL right now at all of these young quarterbacks who are just struggling endlessly. I mean, even Caleb Williams really struggling at times. I mean, he's making sometimes the best throw you've ever seen in your life, and then sometimes the worst throw you've ever seen in your life for the Bears right now. And I think all of it is a product of these young quarterbacks not sitting and developing. The Patriots are really the only ones who are doing it the right way, in my opinion. They've got their young first round pick, and he's not forced into the lineup, forced to go out there and learn by making mistakes and losing his confidence. He's allowed to just kind of sit and grow and soak things up behind the scenes, which, I mean, you can help me with this working list here. Top quarterbacks in the NFL, I'm pretty sure like almost all of them sat for a while. You've got Mahomes, you've got Lamar Jackson, Hurts, Herbert, all of these young quarterbacks who went on to become very successful. They didn't start their first game in the NFL. They sat, they learned, and then they took over as starters. Drake May, I think, is being set up for excellent success. And when you are in some garbage time situations, to get him some practice reps and live game action like that is going to help him in the long run. So I think that the Patriots are developing him the right way. And it all ties into Tom Brady's comments that he had earlier this offseason, where he said that the NFL has a league development problem at the quarterback position. These kids are thrown into the fire too soon. They don't get enough time to grow. And teams change their playbooks and give up on their quarterbacks way too soon. All of those things that he said are absolutely true. Look at Sam Darnold, not to bring up bad memories for Jets fans, but he's finally gotten time to sit. He learned from Kyle Shanahan. Now he's under Kevin O'Connell, and look at how great he's playing. And I think that's always been a possibility for him. Baker Mayfield, another example. These quarterbacks that get thrown into the fire too soon, oftentimes they fall on their face. But the quarterbacks that get to sit and wait and grow, those are the ones that I think develop into something special. So I'm happy that Drake May got a little playing time, but I'm also just really happy with the way the Patriots are handling his development.
Yeah, I like that the Patriots have decided not to start him out of the gate. I think that's a smart call. For me, I just looked at how that game was unfolding, and Jacoby Brissett was sacked 5 times at that point, and then when Drake May does go into the game, he was sacked twice on that possession. Moved the ball a little bit, was 4 of actually maybe not as many passing yards as I thought. 4 of 8 for 22 passing yards. I thought that was a really tough welcome to the NFL moment. I thought maybe they could have found a softer landing spot for him. I guess garbage time is really the only points we'll probably see him early this year. They eventually, I think we see some Drake May starts maybe after the bye week. They have a very late bye in week 14. So maybe the final 4 games we see him start. But again, down 21 points on the road with a defense that was getting after the quarterback at will and out, your starting left tackle and left guard. I thought that was a tough spot. And I thought, I don't want to ever see an injury, but I thought maybe that would be a spot where you're putting your young quarterback in harm's way because of the situation.
I mean, I won't disagree with you. I could see why you feel that way about it. But for me, if you're worried about a player getting injured in a few minutes of playing time, that's almost coaching scared. And I think whenever you do anything scared in the NFL is when you get injured. So if Drake May would have gone out there and played scared, he might have gotten hurt. But the fact that he went out there and was like, okay, listen, it's garbage time. I don't have many great offensive linemen in front of me. I'm not throwing to the best playmaking group, but let me just go out there and get these reps and learn. And he had a couple of pop plays. He didn't have too many great plays, but yeah, I think that when you can get a player on the field in small dosages to try and boost their confidence and develop little aspects of their game, just get something on film for them to study. I think that's important. So again, I think he needs to sit and develop, and I don't think that the Patriots should rush him into the starting lineup. But when they can find little opportunities to gain a little bit more film for him to study from, I think they should. And I think this was a really good opportunity, even though it was a little bit of a risky one.
Fair. The New York Jets find themselves in the win column for the second week in a row. Look to make it 3 in a row at home against Denver. We will preview that one on Thursday's episode, but let's get into your New York Giants, who found their way to an upset win on the road in Cleveland. It didn't really start all that pretty. It actually started kind of rough for the Giants, but things turned around and they got a win. So your reaction, your biggest takeaways, what are we thinking here?
I mean, yeah, the start of the game was an absolute nightmare, but then it just turned into the best game that the Giants have played all season, easily, at least in the first half. I do need to clarify that because there are a lot of Giants fans that are really excited with the performance yesterday, and they're saying Daniel Jones turned in one of the best games of his career, and he was excellent. Listen, Daniel Jones maybe turned in one of the best halves of his career, but he absolutely did not play a full game. And to be completely honest with you, this entire Giants team struggled to play an entire game other than the defense. The offense was just terrible in the second half. And I'm not trying to be overly negative when we're reacting to this win. I'm very excited, and Malik Neighbors is a superstar. All of those things true and constant. But there is a part of me that feels concerned with the way that this team got an early lead and then just sat on it and did nothing in the second half. It felt like the play calling became very conservative, and the Giants at many times in the second half were playing not to lose rather than playing to win. I think they had opportunities to make more plays and drive up the scoreboard even more, and instead they had a 21-7 lead, and they decided that that was good enough, and they were just going to try and hold their defense strong. It worked for them. They ended up securing the victory, but man, they were one mistake away from collapsing. And the Browns had several opportunities down the final stretch of that game where they could have gotten the ball, scored 6 points, and then an extra point to win it. So I just want to see this Giants team take this win, take the positives away, and then build on it and make sure that in the future, when you have a lead, the margin for error doesn't become so thin.
Yeah, totally fair. I mean, disaster strikes. Giants start with the ball, and they fumble the opening kickoff, and then on the first play, the Browns go up 7. But I thought the Giants responded really well. They took a 21-7 lead into the half, but then you point out no scoring in the second half of this game. They did go very conservative. I will say I thought the Giants defense was very strong. In the second half, they did a good job of getting off the field and creating turnovers against Deshaun Watson, who still does not look very good at this point anymore in his career. But point being, there's things to take away from this game that you could really like, obviously. But I'm not victory lapping the performance from the offense as a whole, as you said, because it got very quiet in the second half, and this game probably was closer than what it should have been.
It was absolutely closer than it should have been. I mean, the Browns had multiple opportunities to win that game. They shouldn't have had multiple opportunities to win that game. The Giants should have put that thing to rest very early in the second half. But I do want to focus on the positives, though, because in the first half, it was a great half of offensive football from this Giants team. The rushing attack was solid. I really like what Devin Singletary's done so far this year. He has looked like a great running back for this Giants team through 3 weeks. He breaks a lot of tackles. He picks up a lot of yardage. He had that big run at the end of the game to ice it. But throughout the game, he was picking up ugly yardage and just falling forward for crucial yards. But it really is the Malik Neighbors show right now for the New York Giants. The kid is just special. Whether you're talking him taking a slant and spinning it off and picking up an extra 10 yards after the catch, or if you're talking about him ripping the ball out of a cornerback's hands for a 28-yard gain down the left sideline, or jumping up and doing a 720 twirl in midair for a touchdown grab. Like, the kid can catch anything that's thrown his way. And it is actually clearly having a pretty positive effect on Daniel Jones. One of the things that I've been begging for Daniel Jones to do for the last 6 years is to start throwing into coverage more. Throw the ball up and take some chances. Stop playing this overly conservative brand of football and not giving your receivers opportunities to make plays. I do understand the Giants haven't really had playmakers like that throughout Daniel Jones's career, but now that they do, he's finally throwing the ball with some confidence, throwing it into coverage, and Neighbors is coming down with it. He has to keep doing that, though. There needs to be more opportunities where Jones just throws a back shoulder or a 50-50 ball to Neighbors and lets him make a play, because more often than not, he makes that play, and it's just an impressive highlight to watch every single time. So Neighbors is looking like everything I expected him to be, and then some. He's really having that OBJ-like start to his career, and honestly, I feel like he's only getting started, and his potential is barely even being scratched, as the Giants are still figuring out what their identity is on offense and continuing to install more plays for him in the playbook.
Yeah, I mean, we get Peter S, a Jets fan, in here saying, "I saw the highlights of the Giants Browns, and I agree with Anthony. Malik balled out, and that he's unbelievable. I mean, I texted you during the game, like he's a star already. 3 weeks into his career, and a massive, massive impact player. And we saw him get a ton of targets week after week. It feels like he's targeted 12 times, 8 catches, 78 yards, gets in the end zone twice. Like, this is a guy that you want to force feed the football. And that's why I said before the year, and was it a little bit harsh, I suppose, but Malik Neighbors is idiot proof. Like, you could have pretty much any quarterback back there and have success, and he can have success because of how talented he is. And there's always going to be the Odell Beckham comparisons, because both drafted by the Giants in the first round, both went to LSU, and that's very tough shoes to fill for Malik Neighbors because of just how great Odell was at the beginning of his career. But unfortunately, injuries take a toll, and Father Time is undefeated. But Malik Neighbors, I don't know if you could ask for too much of a better start to his career as a Giants fan, just 3 games in.
You really can't. I mean, 3 touchdowns in 3 games, 2 in this one, and every spectacular grab that he could have an opportunity to make, he's made. Like, it's just been really exciting to see him ball out. And after the catch, before the catch, 50-50 balls, everything. He's the complete package, just like I thought he would be. There were some Giants fans who inexplicably were down on the selection when the Giants made it and said, "Oh, he's just a slot receiver. He's too small." I don't know where they got that from. He's 6'1". He's built like a brick house. Like, he's strong, he's stocky, he's impossible to bring down. He is every bit of a wide receiver one and a powerful player that you want in that position. Like, he isn't just a slot receiver or small guy. He's big, he's stocky, he's really got that Jamar Chase build. And his playing style is so similar to Jamar Chase, but I would argue has the potential to be even more dynamic, because I think he's a way better player after the catch. So yeah, Neighbors is truly special. You're right, those comparisons are always going to be there. And I think that's sticking in the heads of a lot of Giants fans who see OBJ and see Malik and just assume they're similar. They're actually completely different players. Playing style, body type, just uh, pure physicality, 50-50 balls. They catch them differently. They're different players. And Neighbors, because of his body type and his strength and power, has a much higher ceiling, in my opinion, than OBJ did, and really does have just tremendous potential. So I'm loving it. The Malik Neighbors show is one that I want to tune into every single week, and it will definitely keep me invested throughout the season. Just need to see the rest of this offense continue to click and gain some more confidence and consistency, because we've definitely had some faltering pieces here in the offensive lineup other than Neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. As a Malik Neighbors fantasy owner, I've been very, very happy with his production. And as someone who also holds a Malik Neighbors Offensive Rookie of the Year ticket, I have also enjoyed his production. I think Ian brings up an interesting question here, saying Singletary's fumbles can't happen though, and Tracy, from what I've seen, could have similar production and hopefully without turnovers. What do you make of first Singletary's fumbles? Because this is what, the second fumble, I believe, this year from him, and your thoughts on Tyrone Tracy.
I think Singletary's been really good for the Giants minus those 2 fumbles. And it's kind of tough to just be like, oh, minus those 2 turnovers, those devastating plays, he's been great. I understand that. But at the same time, he had the very clutch game-winning run yesterday. Like, he iced the game with the 40-yard run at the end. And he broke like 3 tackles on that play. I don't think that the fumbles have become enough of a problem to take playing time away from Singletary just yet. He's still the best option in the backfield for the Giants. He's the most decisive runner. He falls forward. He breaks tackles. He contributes as a receiver as well. He really has been the complete package. Just the fumbles need to be ironed out. And when you look at his career, he hasn't really had a fumble problem. So I'm going to just chalk this up as early season struggles anomaly, and I think he's going to be fine long term and iron that out. But if it does persist, I think we do see more Tracy. And at the end of the day, I want to see more Tyrone Tracy anyway. I don't want the Giants to get this new running back in Singletary and run him into the ground. Make him last. And you're going to make him last by sharing the workload and using this committee that you set up in the backfield with Tyrone Tracy and maybe even Eric Gray. So I do really like Tyrone Tracy in the way that he runs. He's powerful. He falls forward. He does a lot of similar things to Singletary, but he doesn't touch the ball a whole lot. And I'm hoping that it becomes a little bit more of a split workload. Singletary can still take the bulk of the carries and the bulk of the workload, but I would like to see the Giants work Tyrone Tracy in a little bit more.
Yeah, Tracy, 5 carries for 23 yards, average 4.6 yards per attempt. In this most recent, is it 5 carries per? No, I'm trying to pull up how many stats he's had on the season. Only 8 carries on the year. Is that right?
That might be right. I'd have to double check.
8 for 27, I believe, is what the number is for Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah.
Had the box score pulled up from ESPN, so just click through on him. I like the player. This is someone that we talked about a lot after the draft. So I do think he should have more than 8 carries through 3 games. And, maybe it's similar kind of splits to what we saw in this game. I think it was 16 carries for 65 and 5 for 23 for Tyrone Tracy. I think Singletary is in a way underrated. I thought he had a good year last year. And I think he's a fine piece. I'm not worried about the fumbles. That's not really something that's like persisted throughout his career. It stinks that he's had 2 so early on in the season, but maybe I'm being naive and this is a bigger issue than what I'm making it out to be, but it's not really something that's on my radar for the Giants.
No, I mean, I totally do agree with you. It's not something that concerns me long term. And I think you're right. I mean, listen, he only has 8 carries on the year, Tyrone Tracy, but 5 of those came yesterday. And I think that's going to be more similar to the workload that we see going forward. Like you said, 16 carries to Singletary, 5 to Tracy. And the Giants ran the ball 30 times in that game. If they're continuing to ground and pound and take this run first approach, we're going to see more carries from Tyrone Tracy because they just can't afford to run Devin Singletary into the ground. And listen, like you said, last year versus when he was with the Texans, Singletary was a very efficient back. If you take his per game averages in the 10 games that he started and you spread it across 17 games, he was on pace for 1,200 rushing yards. So he is a tremendously talented back. The Giants just need to continue to stay the course with him and keep him as the workload or keep his workload high and keep him as the lead back and just sprinkle in Tyrone Tracy and continue to develop him because the potential is definitely there for this to become a 2-pronged attack in the backfield, maybe even 3-pronged if Daniel Jones continues to run the ball effectively, which honestly he surprisingly has so far this year. So I'm excited with the Giants backfield. I think that the rushing attack has been consistent. It's really just the passing attack. I do have my concerns because while we talk about how special Malik Neighbors is, Wan'Dale Robinson got his hands on the ball a few times yesterday. He had some nice plays, but then we have the second outside wide receiver position that is just terrible. I mean, Darius Slayton has looked bad this year. Jalen Hyatt is a ghost. What are the Giants doing there? I feel like they're butchering the development of Hyatt. And I feel like Slayton just keeps getting on the field because of the supposed chemistry that he has with Daniel Jones, but we just haven't seen it shown up this year. And I don't know what's going on there. So they do need to figure that out because if this offense continues to become more and more of the Malik Neighbors show, that means it's becoming more and more one-dimensional, and then the Giants are going to become very easy to game plan for. So something needs to be solved there at the wide receiver 2 position, whether that be more snaps to Hyatt or getting Darius Slayton to just play better. I don't know, but they do need to figure something out there.
Yeah, I was very surprised that Jalen Hyatt only had the 1 target in the game. I don't want to use the word falling out of favor. I feel like that's way too dramatic for someone in their 3rd game of year 2, but I don't know what the proper phrasing of that is, but it just doesn't feel like he's all that involved in the offensive game plan. Even it's not like they're feeding him targets and he's just not coming up with the play. He only had one target in this game. He's just not been used seemingly at all.
Yeah, and the problem is when he is used, he's running go routes, post routes, corner routes, all deep downfield. He's not a complete receiver. He is definitely not a complete route runner. And honestly, I made this argument during the preseason and kind of expressed my concern for Hyatt. I don't think that he runs routes at an NFL level just yet. I don't think he separates. I don't think he stacks at the top of his routes. I don't think his stems are all that spectacular, and his release package is just bad, putting it nicely. So I've had my concerns with Jalen Hyatt, and they're only continuing to grow. But part of the problem is Daniel Jones cannot hit the receivers. He can't. Okay, I'm going to actually exemplify this. When Daniel Jones is throwing 20 plus yards downfield, that ball is not even in the same zip code as his wide receivers lately. It's so far off the mark. So how do you get Jalen Hyatt involved if that's the case? I don't know. Because Jones has taken a few deep shots. Obviously, he had the one up the sideline that should have been picked, and Malik Neighbors ripped it out of the hands of the cornerback. That was spectacular from Neighbors. Other than that, though, none of the passes have been catchable over the last 2 weeks. He hasn't even been close to hitting Neighbors or Hyatt on any of those deep targets. So it's just really tough for a guy like Jalen Hyatt when what you do best is run downfield and get open deep. It's really tough to get the ball in your hands if those are the routes you're running and your quarterback is throwing you the ball, but it's not even catchable.
Yeah, that's a very valid point because a lot of Daniel Jones's success this year has come from the underneath passing attack, and the times that he has taken those shots down the field, it hasn't been an accurate ball. We've spent a lot of time on this offense, but I wanted to get your thoughts on the Giants defense from yesterday, specifically the pass rush. I thought had a really good day, ended up sacking Deshaun Watson 8 times, forced him into 2 fumbles. Your thoughts on the Giants' performance from their defense?
I mean, the defense was spectacular this week. Like, this was a massive step in the right direction. We were talking last week how the defense really struggled for 80% of the field. Yeah, locked in the red zone, but you got to be better elsewhere. And this week, I mean, they made plays all over the field. They were stuffing the run. They were forcing fumbles on Deshaun Watson, and the pass rush got home. We saw Brian Burns play a spectacular game of football. I think he had 6 pressures. Dexter Lawrence had 7 pressures. Kayvon Thibodeau only had 2 pressures, but he did total a sack. And then Elijah Chapman, the rookie, undrafted free agent defensive tackle. We had so many question marks. Who's going to be the interior defender alongside Dexter Lawrence? Could it be Chapman? Well, it is Chapman, and he's playing some damn good football. He had a sack, he had a fumble recovery, and he had like 3 or 4 pressures as well. So the entire defensive line really turned on the heat yesterday, and I'm very excited about it, but I also want to throw caution out there and say this Cleveland Browns offensive line was not a normal Cleveland Browns offensive line. All of their best players were missing from the lineup. They were running with basically 4 backups and 1 starter on that offensive line throughout that game. So I do need to see the Giants maintain this pass rushing productivity and carry it over into this Thursday night game versus Dallas against a healthy offensive line. Let me see the pass rushers get home against an offensive line that has its starting 5 on the field. But it is a massive step in the right direction. And listen, sometimes you need a game where you go up against a bruised and battered, injured offensive line, get a bunch of sacks, gain that confidence, and then it carries over to those games where you're going up against a better offensive line. So I think this was a huge confidence boost for this Giants defense. And really, it was just exciting to see these players who we've had so many question marks about finally start to deliver some answers.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with looking at the Cleveland Browns offensive line. It was banged up on the Jet side when their win over the Patriots. Same thing against a beat up offensive line. But I love the point that you talk about confidence because that's a part of the game. I know it's hard to really quantify, and we look at all these numbers and analytics, but kind of just getting the ball rolling and proving like, hey, we can do this as a unit. It makes a big difference. So on the Giants side, I hope for their sake that it's something that they could build off of. I thought Brian Burns had a really good game, which is exciting. He was a big offseason acquisition. Kayvon Thibodeau was around the ball as well. So those 2 guys really getting started. And Azeez Ojulari recovered a fumble too. So there were many guys involved on this defensive line, which is, again, a really good sign and hopefully something that carries over against a desperate Dallas team.
Yeah, that's the hope. And you're right. Dallas is looking like they could be desperate now, especially after another loss at home. And one thing that I'll say is kind of a way to transition towards that Dallas game here for the Giants and look ahead, which I know we're going to preview more on Thursday, is just at the start, that Dallas game looked like it was going to get out of hand and the Ravens were going to blow them out. And maybe those Dallas Cowboys starters were going to get a little bit of a rest towards the end of the game and maybe sit. Well, it ended up going down to the wire. And the Cowboys are probably going to be a little bit tired leaving that game and going into a quick turnaround on Thursday, which I think bodes well for this Giants team as they get ready to reset and sit at home and host the Cowboys. So I think just the fact that that game went down to the wire for Dallas is a good thing for this Giants team. But, talking more loosely about this Giants team, I got to make this point on Deonte Banks because there's been so much conversation about him and the way that he's played so far this season. And I have, I guess, the unpopular opinion of Deonte Banks is playing good football. Yes, he's kind of, in some ways, you can argue, getting picked apart. If I pull up his PFF grades, I bet you it's not very pretty. Yeah, he's all the way down at a 48.7. His tackling grade is high. His coverage grade is terrible. And they listed him with 12 targets in coverage, 6 receptions, and 73 yards, and 2 touchdowns surrendered. All of that understood. He really has let up way too many receptions. Understood. I got it. However, look at the film. Watch how close in coverage he is with all of these guys. The separation is not there for any of these receivers that he's going up against. He just has one fatal flaw, and it's the fact that he can't turn his head around. He has no ball skills, and he doesn't get his hands on the football. That's it. Other than that, he's been excellent. He's a great tackler. He's awesome in run defense. He's jammy at the line of scrimmage and press, and he's sticking with these receivers stride for stride. It's just when the ball is delivered, he never has the spatial awareness to get his head turned around. So two notes on that. Number one, it reminds me a little bit too much of Eli Apple, and it does scare the crap out of me. But the second note is, as a young cornerback who is playing in a secondary where he's the only talented young cornerback, the spotlight is so bright on Deonte Banks. So it makes him look so much worse when he lets up a reception because everybody else is also just constantly letting up receptions. So we expect him to be the guy that doesn't do that. But he's going up against Amari Cooper, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin. And some of these plays, Shane Bowen is just leaving him one-on-one on an island on the goal line against Amari Cooper or Justin Jefferson. He's not going to be able to make that play. There's not a single cornerback in the NFL that can make that play. So my hot take here with Deonte Banks is I think he's playing better football than what he's being given credit for. He just has this one fatal flaw, and he's only in his 18th career game. Let him develop a little bit. Let him start to figure out his awareness and his ball skills. If he's able to get better in that regard, do some drills on ball skills, I think he can really become an excellent player just because the coverage is so tight. His main job is to cover. He is covering. Once he figures out the ball skills, he can be a really special player.
NYC TV, NYC says, other than that, that's what you need to be a number one corner. I don't think that's a fair takeaway from your comments here, because yes, are some of these numbers not pretty? Like giving up 3 touchdowns through 3 weeks isn't a great sign. But as you point out, with how tight he is in coverage, to me, that is more indicative of him being able to turn it around and get back on track. Like if he was just nowhere close to any of these guys on film, that's a completely different story. But I think things will start to regress or improve or going back to the mean. We know he's a good player. This same argument though is always made about Sauce Gardner because he never comes up with interceptions. And like, I don't think anyone is realistically talking about Sauce Gardner not being a team's number one corner because he doesn't come up with interceptions. So I think the main point that I wanted to bring up is I think we put an emphasis on intercepting the ball. I don't think that is always telling of how well a cornerback is or isn't playing with their turnover numbers.
Yeah, I agree with you. And listen, I want to see him start to come down with interceptions. I want to see him make more pass breakups at the very least and get his hands on these footballs. He's not doing that yet, but like I said, his main job is to cover. He's covering well. Once he adds the ball skills to his skill set, he's going to become a really good player. So I just think it's about being patient with him. That's kind of the main message here that I'm trying to preach. Giants fans love to be patient with Daniel Jones. We're in year 6 of the Daniel Jones experience, for God's sake. Let's also be patient with Deonte Banks, not get down on him after 18 career games and run him out of town like we did with Evan Engram and some of these other Giants players. Give these kids time to develop, especially Banks, who really is a hungry player, an exciting player who loves NY and loves his teammates. He's a great locker room presence. Just got to give him a little bit more time here, I think. If we're in week 10 and he's still not getting any pass breakups or any interceptions, all right, maybe we could start to have a larger conversation. But through 3 weeks where he's gone up against Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, and Justin Jefferson, I'm not overly concerned. I think this Giants defense in general in the secondary has a lot of work to be done. And again, it's just about growing and developing for Banks as he continues to take those strides. I see the path here is kind of my main point. I see the path to him becoming an elite number one cornerback if he just fixes this one fatal flaw.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like if in week 10, if we're looking at the numbers and he's allowed 800 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns, then yeah, like that's a little bit different here. But if he settles in, which I think we both have seen like on film and, looking at his numbers last year, the start that he's had to this season is not on par for where he's been the other 15 games of his career. So I'm with you. Don't panic on Deonte Banks. I think he'll be just fine. Any closing thoughts here before we wrap on our Monday edition?
Feels good for it to be a victory Monday, that's for sure. And listen, like I said, this Giants team showed a lot of flashes of potential in this game, but I can't get my hopes up just yet. We're still 1-2, technically in second place in the division, sure, but we are 1-2. We dropped a game that we absolutely should have won against the Commanders. We kind of barely snuck away with this one against the Browns, tried our best to lose it in some instances. I got to see this team play full 4 quarters of solid football before I get convinced that they're a good team. It's a step in the right direction, but please, we got to compound this. Don't have a win in week 3 versus the Browns and then drop a goose egg on Thursday night primetime football versus the Cowboys. I got to see this team play with consistency and hopefully stack some more wins so that my mental sanity can improve throughout the course of the season.
I love that. We got to keep Anthony mentally stable. That's our goal for this year. I'm going to Jets Broncos this weekend, so I will be much more excited on Thursday about that. We'll get a lot into that game as well. See if the Jets can make it 3 in a row and have a repeat performance against a team that got in the win column as well in week 3 in the Denver Broncos. But we'll save that for Thursday. That'll do it for us on this one. I'm Matt. He's Anthony, and we will catch you next time.